We sure will. We shall overcome, despite their blocks and attempted fun and games. We always overcome. Right, we're going to get into some news and views around the world. Tonight's show has a distinctly from Russia with love flavour right through it. Well, first we're going to go to the masked crusader Biden, who was rebuffing Afghan questions this week and said, "I want to talk about happy things." And the fake president was in no mood to be pressed by journalists about his order to withdraw US troops from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war. Yet another war they did not win, despite the predictable Hollywood scripts of the future will be saying differently. Now, he defended the pullout on Friday as nothing unusual before refusing to answer any more questions from the White House reporters about his decision, which was actually Trump's. Now, the exit of all US forces from Bagram Air Base comes as Taliban fighters advance across the country, which US officials concede may be heading for civil war. But Biden is about as deflective as another so-called leader. And the country is in utter turmoil, despair, fear and poverty, and the masked man wants to talk about happy things. Like what, Biden? 18 months in charge, and what have your group of bandits changed for the better for the people? Zero. We're off to the UK now. And the outsourcing company known as Serco has upgraded its profits forecast thanks to continuing strong revenues from its lucrative contract to run part of the government's COVID-19 test and trace service. They all made lots of money. And the company said its underlying trading profit for 2021 would be £15 million, which is about $19 million, higher than previously thought at about £200 million, which is about $260 million profit. Now, shares rose 5% in early trading, making Serco the top riser on the FTSE 250. And it runs large parts of the largely privatised service, which is labelled as the NHS Test and Trace. And it runs a quarter of the testing sites and half the Tier 3 contact tracers, who are mainly tasked with phoning the contacts of the people who have tested positive. Now, the outsourcing firm's appointment to run part of the test and trace system has proved controversial, as the opposition Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer described as outrageous Serco's decision to pay investors a £17 million dividend that was funded partly by pandemic profits. So he's the new Labour leader. Let's have a look at him, shall we? Now, Starmer married Victoria Alexandra in 2007, and she was previously a lawyer, but now works in NHS occupational health. The couple's son and daughter are being brought up in the Jewish faith of their mother, and the family attend Shabbat dinners. Well, I never. Now, Serco has also confirmed it has passed information to the Revenue and Customs Service over the possible use of mini umbrella companies, of which they're one of them, structures that have been subject to warnings over tax dodging. The tax dodgers are reporting on the tax dodgers. If it didn't cost the people so much money, it would be amusing. Now, Serco has ordered suppliers to ensure they directly employ workers after The Guardian uncovered evidence of the structures across the test and trace system. And in February, Serco acknowledged it had benefited from the test and trace contract. While the government has allowed it to make lower profits than usual on that contract, the extra £350 million of revenues has made up for the impact of the pandemic in other areas. And the Serco Chief Executive, Rupert Soames, and the Chief Financial Officer, Angus Cockburn, were given a payout of £7.4 million for 2020, including bonuses worth £5.5 million. That's Serco for you. Just when everyone in the UK thought things were winding down there, with the alleged lockdown ending on July 19th, Serco has just been awarded a further £322 million contract to continue its work on the COVID-19 test and trace system. And in an announcement to the markets, the outsourcing giant said the new contract had been awarded after a competitive process, which is a complete and utter lie, run by the Department for Health and Social Care and also the Crown Commercial Service. The Crown Commercial Service. And the contract, despite the UK lockdown allegedly ending, is running for another 12 months with an option to extend for a further 6 months. But did anyone notice the significance of the number for the contract? 322 million. 322 is the Skull and Bones insignia. Skull and Bones, lesser known as the Brotherhood of Death. Now, Serco are also in line to attain a contract to manage UK satellites called Skynet. Of course, the mention of Skynet, satellites, cybersecurity and AI brings up the Terminator movie. But if you thought that was the future as well, Skynet dates back to the 1960s as a UK defence project. So let's have a look at Rupert Soames, shall we, the Chief Executive of what is essentially a private group that runs the government in the UK and in part runs the government in America also. Anna von Reitz explained this far more than I have. Of the 19 essential government services are not being ran by the White House or Congress, but by these private organisations. So Soames was born in Croydon to Christopher and Mary Soames. He is the grandson of Winston Churchill, a nephew of the one-time Defence Secretary Duncan Sandys and his wife Diana Churchill, of journalist Randolph Churchill and of actress and dancer Sarah Churchill. And he is a great-nephew of the founders of the Scout movement, the first Baron Baden-Powell and his wife, the Baroness Baden-Powell. His brother is a former MP, Sir Nicholas Soames. And as you can see, it's all kept in-house. And that is how they keep power. But given Churchill, Winston, was alleged to be a Rothschild, and Angus Cockburn works for KPMG, also Rothschild, this is a faction-based harvesting group that practically runs the UK and the US government on behalf of the Rothschilds. Oops. Early in the show for exposés, but there you go. New York has become the first US state to declare a disaster emergency order to address rising gun violence. And the state saw 51 shootings over the July 4th holiday weekend, and Governor Andrew Cuomo said he has signed the executive order. Now, the directive will funnel $138.7 million towards gun violence intervention and prevention programs. And it comes amid reports of a rise in gun deaths countrywide, including nearly 200 over the past weekend. And in March, the FBI released preliminary 2020 statistics showing a significant jump, 25%, in murders from the year before. And so far, the upward trend, it is said, has continued into 2021. Now, in the US, the majority of homicides are gun-related, the report says. But what they don't tell you is the most gun deaths are suicides. But does anyone ask Cuomo, was he responsible for the rise in shootings after he defunded the NYPD? Because since then, gun violence has significantly rose, and common sense tells you that he is wholly responsible for it, just like he was wholly responsible for all the nursing home deaths. And one has to ask, why aren't New York following California and having a vote of no confidence? Or why hasn't a certain enforcement team who said they were going to arrest him many, many months ago not done it yet? After myself and the trustee pressured Trump over this deal, it is pleasing this week to announce that the Department of Defense is cancelling a controversial $10 billion cloud computing contract that had been awarded to Microsoft over Amazon under the Trump administration. And the department announced Tuesday that it is cancelling the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure JEDI contract that was previously awarded to Microsoft, and it will instead seek new solicitations for an updated joint warfighting cloud capability contract from Amazon and Microsoft. Now, the JEDI contract would have resulted in Microsoft building a cloud storage system for sensitive military data and technology, such as artificial intelligence, for the Department of Defense, and could have resulted in revenue of up to $10 billion over 10 years. But the point is, they've already got a cloud storage system. It's called the KIMS system. Are they ignoring that now? But all that military training, and I'm talking in terms of trades now rather than war fighting, and we cannot produce people who have gone through the ranks to develop a system and content to just give it to globalist companies. The military do all kinds of IT training. You're telling me that their own department can't come up with their own contract? But no, they give it to these globalist companies whose record of working against the people is absolutely appalling. And maybe that's why the DoD was selecting them. Just saying. But off to Belarus now, and it has closed its border with Ukraine claiming that arms are being smuggled into the country. Not Shiva, just military arms. And President Alexander Lukashenko says it is part of an attempt by outside powers to overthrow his regime, according to the report. They always describe it in negative terms when they don't get their own way. They described him as an authoritarian regime. Oh, he's just looking after his own country, and it doesn't suit certain clowns. But Mr. Lukashenko claimed that his security services had uncovered a foreign-backed terrorist sleeper cells plotting to oust him from power. And he said they have crossed the line and we cannot forgive them. And he alleged the weapons were being shipped to terrorist cells funded by Germany, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, and the US. And a huge amount of weapons is coming from Ukraine, hello Bidens, to Belarus. And he said, that's why I ordered border security forces to fully close the border with Ukraine, which he said at a ceremony marking the country's 30 years of independence following the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he also said he would confront Germany's Angela Merkel and other leaders about the claims. Now, Ukraine denied interfering in Belarus's domestic affairs and said closing the 674-mile border would make its people suffer. So Belarus, for those who don't know, shares a border with Ukraine in the south. It borders Poland and Lithuania in the west, Latvia in the north, and Russia in the east. But I think it's fairly obvious as to who is involved in this. Yet again, CIA, NATO, and also the DNC criminal elements. Just when you thought there couldn't possibly be any more. Wrong. Just keeps appointing them. President Biden's nominee to be the next ambassador to Germany is an Ivy League president whose university paid him, Biden, nearly $1 million for an honorary professor gig where he was seldom seen. It was revealed last Friday. The University of Pennsylvania president Amy Gutmann, who has headed the Philadelphia-based institution since 2004, is the first envoy to a G7 nation to be nominated by Biden. And if confirmed by the Senate, which it will, the 71-year-old Gutmann could be the second woman to serve as America's chief diplomat in Berlin. Gutmann, born in New York and born to Jewish parents. What a surprise that is. Not. But between 2013 and last year, the university allegedly received tens of millions of dollars in undisclosed donations from China, according to the National Legal and Policy Center, and the dollar totals dramatically increased after the school opened its Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. Why would they open a department for him? This was before he was president, I might add. And the NLPC filed a complaint against University of Pennsylvania, alleging $22 million in anonymous donations from the country for the Biden Center and $70 million from China in total. And the University of Pennsylvania has stonewalled all inquiries into the identities of the Chinese donors who made the $22 million anonymous donations to the university. And that was according to the NLPC chairman, Peter Flaherty. And he said, we think it's time for her, Dr. Gutmann, to answer the question and identify the donors, and it would be useful to ask, in my opinion, Feinstein, Brown and Pelosi also, not just Biden, and Newsom as well. They're all involved in China. Now, the Biden Center was opened in March 2017, about a year before Biden announced his 2020 presidential campaign. And the complaint charges that in 2017, out of a total of $7.7 million in donations from China, $500,000 came from anonymous donors. Now, after Biden launched his campaign in 2018, the total jumped from 7.7 to 27.1 million, with anonymous donors giving $15.8 million. I guess that doesn't count for foreign collusion and interference. In 2019, Chinese donors gave $26.9 million to the center, and $6 million of it anonymously. And yet again, more proof, what we said in this show, that all, and I mean all, American universities are being used as criminal centers for criminal activities. As a side note to the events of the Magic Hotel in Miami, Florida, that neatly collapsed itself into its own footprint, and the wonders of the rise of intelligent buildings, one person has been the spokesman for that particular county. So let's take a peek at her, shall we, and see what we find. Daniela Levine Carver is an American lawyer, social worker and politician who's been the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Florida, since last year. Previously, she was a Miami-Dade County Commissioner from 2014 until her election as mayor. She is the first woman and first person of Jewish descent to serve as the mayor of Miami-Dade County. Daniela was born in New York and born to Jewish parents. Back to New York again. Another clown. Rudy Giuliani has had his law license suspended in New York for making false and misleading claims, it is said, around the 2020 US election. Giuliani, who's 77, has been mayor of New York City and a personal lawyer to the former President Donald Trump. Now, hours after a New York appeals court ruled Mr. Giuliani had lied about electoral fraud to the public and also in legal statements. And the decision made by a 5-judge panel is temporary, pending the outcome of a full disciplinary hearing. Faction-based fighting, it seems to me that. The US-based Hilton Hospitality Company is developing a hotel that will be built on the site of an Uyghur mosque. That's how it's pronounced. I was saying Uyghur, but apparently it's Uyghur. Recently demolished by the Chinese Communist Party in China's western region of Xinjiang, according to Bitter Winter, who runs an online religious liberty and human rights magazine. Now, the mosque land was purchased at a public auction by a local developer, who in turn signed a contract to develop there a Hampton Hotel and one of the brands owned by Hilton. Now, the magazine referenced a recent report by the UK's Telegraph newspaper, which revealed on June 12th that Chinese government authorities tore down Hotan's dueling mosque in recent years as part of a plan to replace the Islamic religious centre with a commercial development including a Hampton Hotel, which is a brand of hotel owned by Hilton Worldwide Holdings. Just like what happened after Katrina. The Jewish-owned floating casinos, the boat casino pirates, came onto the land. The Pentagon are at it again. Because they said on Tuesday the department's leaders will look into making COVID-19 vaccines mandatory once they are approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And they said should the FDA approve it, then I'm certain Pentagon leadership will take a look at what our options are going forward, including the potential options of making it mandatory. But I'm not going to get too far ahead of process right now, said the Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby on Tuesday. Now, currently, almost 69% of the military has received at least one dose of a vaccine. And last week, the Army Times reported that the Army has directed commands to prepare to administer mandatory COVID-19 vaccines as early as September the 1st, pending FDA approval. Now, the Pentagon cannot mandate vaccines that are not FDA approved. Now, the Republican Thomas Massie has said that he is being contacted by members of the US military who say they will quit if the vaccines are mandated. And he's introduced a bill that will prohibit mandatory requirements for the vaccine. Does anyone ask, since when have the Pentagon become medical experts? You know, they can't even manage a budget, never mind a war. And now they think they're medical experts. 18 years in Afghanistan and similar in Iraq tells you they can't mind a war. And now they think we want their opinions on vaccines. Well, we don't. The answer is, go fuck yourselves. Literally. Remember, the Pentagon had stockpiled PPEs before the pandemic took place. I guess they are in on the money game also. Now, here's something that we have advocated for TPC businesses. And I was surprised to hear that it's been implemented in Iceland, of all places. Trials of a 4-day week in Iceland were an overwhelming success and led to many workers moving to shorter hours, according to researchers. And the trials in which workers were paid the same amount for shorter hours took place between 2015 and 2019. Now, what they found was productivity remained the same or improved in the majority of workplaces. And now a number of other trials are being run across the world, including in Spain and also by Unilever in New Zealand. Now, in Iceland, the trials run by Reykjavik City Council and the national government eventually included more than 2,500 workers, which amounts to about 1% of Iceland's working population. And many of them moved from a 40-hour week to 35 or 36-hour week. And researchers from the UK think tank Autonomy and the Association for Sustainable Democracy, ALDE, in Iceland revealed the details. Now, the trials led unions to renegotiate working patterns, and now 86% of Iceland's workforce have either moved to shorter hours for the same pay or will gain the right to, according to the research. Workers have been reported feeling less stressed and less risk of burnout, and said their health and work-life balance had improved dramatically and also has the benefits of cutting carbon emissions. Jolly good. Mr. Putin and Russia this week has accused the UK and US military of staging a complex provocation after the British warship HMS Defender sailed near the coast of the Russian-annexed Crimea. It's not annexed at all. It belongs to Russia, as does Latvia, Lithuania, and all the other satellite countries. And he said whilst there was no risk of starting World War III, he believed it was part of an attempt to set up military bases in or near Ukraine. Hello, Belarus. Mr. Putin alleged that a US spy plane was part of the operation too. Now, the Royal Navy in the UK rejected the Russian account of what happened on June 23rd, and the BBC correspondent Jonathan Beale, who was on board HMS Defender at the time, said it had been buzzed by Russian warplanes and Coast Guard vessels had threatened to open fire on the ship. But why would they have a correspondent on a warship anyway, if it's not in war mode? Common sense again. Now, some firing did take place, he said, but it was well out of range. Now, reiterating the Navy's explanation, Prime Minister Boris Johnson spoke on Wednesday that the destroyer was conducting innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters in accordance with international law. Like it was innocently passing through the South China Sea near to the contested islands. Do these people really think before they speak? There's quite a simple solution. If you don't want incidents, stay away from other countries' waters. Problem solved. But quite frankly, we will ignore what the Royal Navy have to say, because they are little more than puppets for NATO these days. Now, a separate encounter in the Black Sea has since been reported by the Dutch Navy, which has accused Russian fighter jets of repeatedly harassing its ship HNLMS Evertsen. But the question is, here comes common sense again, why are the Dutch Navy even in the Black Sea? Does anyone ask? Is the Black Sea a tributary into Holland? No. Then why are they there then? Now, after last week's incident involving HMS Defender, the British ambassador was summoned by the Russian Foreign Ministry, which protested against what it said was a violation of its territory. Now, Crimea, the BBC says, was seized by Russia. No, it wasn't. But most of the international community considers it to be part of Ukraine. No, most of the clowns. Not the international community, just the clowns. But if that's the criteria, that the international community considers it to be part of something else, Palestine was seized by Israel, and most of the international community considers it part of Palestine. Yeah, how does that work out? Why aren't warships off the coast of Tel Aviv if that is the criteria? Now, Putin was asked during his annual TV phone-in with Russian citizens whether the incident risked provoking World War III, and he said even if HMS Defender had been sunk, that would not have happened. They know they cannot win this conflict. We would be fighting for our own territory, and we didn't travel thousands of miles to get to their borders. They did. Exactly. However, he did accuse the UK and the US of mounting a coordinated, provocative operation to assess Russia's response, and he pointed out that he had personally ordered troops to pull back from Ukraine's borders 2 months ago, as international concern intensified over what Russia insisted was nothing more than military exercises. Now, he said that the British and US forces were trying to open up military bases, making Ukrainian territory close or on the border with Russia a military platform that is a threat to Russian security. And he's also linked it to the summit with President Joe Biden in Geneva the week before. And he also suggested that a US reconnaissance plane had taken off from a NATO airfield in Greece, possibly from Crete. The problem with this story is all this childlike game playing, putting ships near other people's countries. And with Israel, again, attacking Syria and Lebanon. And now the NATO goons are pushing into Russian territory. The great question is this the caliphate war they always wanted? Isolate Russia and then attack Iran. And with Russia tied down defending their own country, they would be less able to defend Iran. And what the world needs now is to wake up to this reality and stop supporting the clown-based militaries of America, UK, Holland, Israel and other NATO-led countries before their child-level behaviour causes more carnage. Researchers working in Israel have identified a previously unknown type of ancient human. These next three are all to do with archaeology, and you will connect dots. That lived alongside our species more than 100,000 years ago. And they believe that the remains uncovered near the city of Ramlah represent one of the last survivors of a very ancient human group. Now, the finds consist of a partial skull and jaw from an individual who lived between 140,000 and 120,000 years ago. And the team members think the individual descended from an earlier species that may have spread out of the region hundreds of thousands of years ago and given rise to the Neanderthals in Europe and their equivalents in Asia. Here we go. Out goes the fake out of Africa theory, and in comes life started in Israel. Now, the scientists have named the newly discovered lineage the Nesher Ramlah homotype. And Dr. Hilla May of Tel Aviv University said the discovery reshapes the story of human evolution, particularly those of the Neanderthals. And the general picture of Neanderthal evolution had in the past been linked closely with Europe. But it all started in Israel. And we are suggesting that a local group was the source population, she told the BBC. What a jackass. Except Israel didn't exist until 1948. Oops. So how can she explain that? What's wrong with these people? Everything's all about them and their fake state that didn't exist until 1948. And if you disagree with that, please show me a valid ancient map where it says Israel on it. It doesn't. Now, according to the article, during interglacial periods, waves of humans, the Nesha Ramla people, migrated from the Middle East to Europe, and they deduced all that just from one partial skull and jaw. What an impressive piece of fake news that is. And Dr. May suggests that these humans were the ancestors of Neanderthals. No. And the European Neanderthal actually began here in Israel and the Levant and migrated to Europe. It's all about me. While interbreeding with other groups of humans. Nesha Ramla. Interesting name they gave there. Nesha is a city in the occupied region of Palestine. But Nesha means a vulture. Sounds a bit like Thoth. Ramla is another city in the occupied region, but it derives from Egypt, which is quite a common theme that for things linked to Israel and its religious-based cult. But Ramla means prophetess. So to them it means the prophetess has spoken and the vulture, which is the Bennu bird or the phoenix, is returning. No, it's not. As scientists and scholars in America try to stifle the fact that white Europeans were in America before the Indian tribes was unveiled this week. In what was a major find in Titusville, Florida, has been hushed up, blocked and denied despite the DNA proof that there was a group of white Europeans living and thriving together at least 8,000 years ago in Florida. Why are they so desperate to stifle the truth? And why haven't they put the findings of this groundbreaking discovery from 26 years ago, I might add, it's not recent, on display? And who gains from it as it rewrites their history again? Final piece before the break, and further archaeological news, as academics believe they have identified a remarkable geological secret. A sunken continent hidden under Iceland and the surrounding ocean, which they have dubbed Icelandia. Now, an international team of geologists led by Gillian Fulger, the Emeritus Professor of Geophysics in the Department of Earth Sciences at Durham University, which is in the UK, believed the sunken continent could stretch from Greenland all the way to Europe, and it is believed to cover an area of 600,000 kilometres, but when the adjoining areas west of Britain are included in Greater Icelandia, the entire area could be 1 million kilometres squared in size. And if proven, it means that the giant supercontinent of Pangaea, which is thought to have broken up over 50 million years ago, has in fact not fully broken up. And this new theory challenges long-held scientific ideas around the extent of oceanic and continental crust in the North Atlantic region and how volcanic islands like Iceland formed. Archaeology now is rendered to the public as little more than an exercise to keep up the fake history of this planet, all at the behest of one race of people that have no ancestral home, I might add, until the Rothschildians decided to create one like a modern cryptocurrency out of fresh air. But this is not a new discovery at all. That is the Arya. But like the previous stories, it will not be disclosed. Why? Because it was the white race. And the Hebrew Anunnaki dark forces who run media, science and archaeology go to great lengths to deny the public the facts. We'll be back shortly.